The Vexari Empire had ruled the outer rim of the galaxy for 12,000 years. Their ships were beautiful things, sleek and silver, powered by engines that bent space itself. Their weapons could crack planets open like eggs. Their armies numbered in the trillions, spread across 900 worlds. When they turned their eyes toward the Sol system, they expected another easy conquest. It was what they had always done. Find a primitive species, crush them, enslave them, move on to the next. High Admiral Torex stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and watched the small blue planet grow larger on his viewing screen. He had conquered 47 worlds in his career. This would be 48. He felt no excitement, no anticipation. This was routine. This was his purpose. Analysis of the native species, he asked his science officer. The officer checked his data tablet, his thin fingers moving quickly across the surface. They call themselves humans, High Admiral, carbon-based bipeds, average lifespan of 80 standard cycles. They have only recently achieved interstellar travel. Their fastest ships can barely reach 1/10 the speed of light. Torex made a sound of amusement, a clicking noise that passed for laughter among his kind. Primitive. Indeed, High Admiral. Their weapons technology is equally basic. Chemical propellants, nuclear fission, crude laser systems. Nothing that could threaten our shields. Our analysts estimate their entire military force could not damage even one of our standard cruisers. Population. Approximately 8 billion on their home world. Another 2 billion spread across their solar system in various colonies. They have settlements on the fourth planet, several moons, and numerous asteroids. Torex nodded slowly. 10 billion subjects for the Empire. They would make adequate laborers once they were broken. All species broke eventually. The Velori had broken after 3 years of resistance. The Krix had broken after 5. The Manthari had broken after a single devastating attack on their home world. Humans would break too. They always did. Send the standard ultimatum, Torex ordered. They have one rotation of their planet to surrender unconditionally. If they refuse, we begin the purification of their outer colonies. The message was sent across all frequencies, translated into every human language the Vexari had decoded. It explained, in simple terms, what the Vexari Empire offered: complete submission, mandatory labor quotas, genetic modification to remove aggressive tendencies, and the honor of serving the greatest civilization in the known universe. Resistance would be met with annihilation. Cooperation would be rewarded with survival. The humans did not respond for 12 hours. Torex waited patiently on his bridge, drinking bitter tea and reviewing conquest protocols. Most species needed time to accept their fate. The shock was always the hardest part. Once they understood the reality of their situation, the surrender always came. When the response finally came, it was not what he expected. A human female appeared on his screen. She wore a uniform of dark blue with gold trim, decorated with symbols he did not recognize. Her hair was gray, her face lined with age, but her eyes burned with something Torex had seen in conquered species before: defiance. But there was something else there too, something harder and colder. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force," she said. Her voice was steady, calm, completely controlled. "On behalf of humanity, I have a message for the Vexari Empire." She paused and Torex leaned forward slightly, curious despite himself. "Go to hell." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving only static. Torex stared at the blank screen for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was a cold sound without humor, echoing through the silent bridge. "Begin the purification," he said. "Start with their Mars colony. We will show these humans the cost of their arrogance." The Vexari fleet moved toward Mars like a wave of silver death. There were 200 warships in the attack force, each one capable of reducing a city to ash in seconds. The human colony on Mars was home to 800,000 people. They had 3 defense platforms and a handful of patrol ships. It was not even close to a fair fight. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 47 minutes. When it was over, the Mars colony was a field of craters and burning debris. The defense platforms were gone, vaporized by concentrated plasma fire. The patrol ships were gone, scattered wreckage floating in the void. 800,000 humans were dead. Men, women, children. Scientists, farmers, engineers. Families who had come to build a new life on a new world. Torex watched the aftermath on his screen and felt satisfaction. This was how it always went. The first blow broke their spirit. The second broke their will. By the third, they were begging for mercy. It was simply a matter of showing them the reality of their situation. He sent another message to Earth. Your Mars colony is gone. Your Jupiter stations will be next. Then your moon. Then Earth itself. Surrender now and some of you may live. Continue to resist and we will kill every last one of you. The response came faster this time. It was Admiral Chen again. Her uniform was slightly disheveled now, as if she had not slept since their last communication. You killed 800,000 of our people, she said. Her voice was steady, but Torex could see something in her eyes that had not been there before. It was not fear. It was not despair. It was rage, pure cold, burning rage. Every single one of them had a name, Chen continued. They had families. They had dreams. They were teachers and engineers and children and grandparents. Sarah Martinez was going to be a doctor. James Wang had just celebrated his 5th birthday. Alina Kuznetsov was 3 months pregnant with her first child, and you killed them like they were nothing. She leaned closer to the camera. We will remember every single one, and we will make you pay for every single one. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but we will never stop. We will never surrender. We will never forget. And one day, when your empire is burning and your people are screaming, you will remember this moment. You will remember the day you made an enemy of humanity. The transmission ended. Torex felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. He pushed it aside. It was nothing. Brave words from a doomed species. He had heard similar speeches from the Velori, from the Krix, from a dozen other species. They all said the same things. They all fell in the end. Continue the purification, he ordered. Destroy their Jupiter stations. The fleet moved on. The Jupiter stations fell in less than an hour. Another 200,000 humans died. Then the Saturn refineries destroyed in a hurricane of plasma fire. Another 100,000. Then the asteroid mining operations picked off one by one, 50,000 more. Each time Torex expected surrender. Each time he received only silence or messages of defiance. The humans were stubborn, he admitted to himself. More stubborn than any species he had conquered before. But stubbornness would not save them. Nothing would save them. The fleet reached the moon. Earth's single natural satellite was home to 3 million humans and their largest off-world military installation. This would be the true test. Surely, with their largest colony threatened, with Earth itself visible in the sky above them, the humans would see reason. Admiral Chen appeared on his screen again. She looked tired now, Torex noted. There were dark circles under her eyes and her uniform was wrinkled. But that burning anger was still there, perhaps even stronger than before. You have one chance, Torex told her. Surrender the moon colony and we will spare Earth. Continue to resist and we will destroy everything, every city, every village, every trace that your species ever existed. Chen smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something he did not. High Admiral, she said, I want you to pay attention to what happens next. I want you to remember it for the rest of your life, however long that may be. The transmission ended. Torex frowned. What was the human planning? He got his answer 30 seconds later. Alarms screamed across his flagship. Tactical officers shouted warnings, their voices overlapping in panic. On the viewing screen, Torex watched as ships began emerging from behind the moon. Human ships, hundreds of them. They were crude, ugly things compared to Vexari vessels, blocky and utilitarian, bristling with weapons, but there were so many of them. Where did they come from? Torex demanded. Unknown, High Admiral. They appear to have been hidden in underground facilities on the lunar surface. Our initial scans did not detect them. How many? The officer checked his readings, then checked them again. His face went pale, his scales turning a sickly gray. 412 warships, High Admiral, plus an estimated 800 fighter craft. Torex felt that unfamiliar flicker again. This time he recognized it. It was doubt. They built all of this in secret, he asked, while we were watching them. It appears so, High Admiral. Our initial scans did not detect the construction facilities. They were deep underground, shielded from sensors. They must have been building for years, preparing for this moment. The human fleet formed into a wedge formation and began accelerating toward the Vexari armada. They were still outmatched, Torex knew. His ships were superior in every way, but the humans had more than doubled his numbers, and they had achieved complete surprise. For the first time in his career, High Admiral Torex felt uncertain. All ships, he commanded, battle formation, prepare to engage. The two fleets met in the space between the Moon and Earth. The battle that followed would later be called the First Defense of Earth. It lasted 6 hours. The Vexari won. Of course they won. Their technology was simply too advanced, their ships too powerful. When the fighting ended, the human fleet had been reduced to scattered debris. Only 43 of their ships survived, limping away toward Earth with critical damage. But the Vexari had lost 78 ships. 78 ships destroyed by a primitive species that had barely achieved interstellar travel. 78 ships that should have been invincible. Torex stood on his bridge, surrounded by damage reports and casualty figures, and tried to understand what had happened. The humans had fought like nothing he had ever seen. They had rammed his ships when their weapons failed. They had blown up their own vessels to take Vexari cruisers with them. They had fought to the last breath, the last bullet, the last drop of blood. And they had not surrendered. Not once. Not a single human ship had surrendered. Even when they were crippled, even when they were burning, even when death was certain, they had kept fighting. High Admiral, his communications officer said carefully, we are receiving a transmission from Earth. Put it through. Admiral Chen appeared on screen. Behind her, Torex could see a command center in chaos. Officers ran back and forth. Alarms wailed. But Chen herself was calm, almost serene. Congratulations, she said. You won the battle. You lost 78 ships doing it, but you won. Torex said nothing. We lost 369 ships, Chen continued. We lost good people, brave people, people who knew they were going to die and flew into battle anyway. And you know what? Tomorrow we start building more ships. The day after that we start building more. We will never stop building. We will never stop fighting because that is what humans do, High Admiral. We endure, we adapt, we overcome, and we never ever give up. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on the camera. You should run while you still can. The transmission ended. Torex stared at the screen for a long time. Then he turned to his tactical officer. Prepare the fleet, he said. We will destroy Earth and end this. He told himself it was simple strategy. End the war quickly. Eliminate the enemy before they could recover. It was the logical thing to do. He did not admit, even to himself, that for the first time in his life, he wanted a battle to be over. He wanted to be done with this strange, stubborn, terrifying species. The Vexari fleet limped toward Earth. They had started with 200 warships. Now they had 122. Still more than enough to destroy a primitive planet, Torex told himself. Still more than enough. But the doubt would not leave him. The humans had surprised him twice now, first with their hidden fleet, then with their ferocity in battle. What other surprises were they hiding? He would not give them time to reveal them. He would burn their planet to glass and be done with this troublesome species forever. The fleet entered Earth orbit. Below them, the blue and green world turned slowly, peaceful and beautiful. Torex could see the lights of their cities on the night side. Millions of lights, billions of people. Soon to be ash. Target their major population centers, he ordered. Begin orbital bombardment. The weapons charged, the targeting systems locked on. In moments it would all be over. Then the alarms began screaming again. High Admiral, we are detecting incoming projectiles, thousands of them. Source. The planet's surface. They are launching from every continent, every country, every military installation. Torex watched his tactical display fill with red dots. They were missiles, he realized. Primitive chemical rockets, the same crude technology the humans had been using since before they reached space. They should have been easy targets. But there were so many. Thousands upon thousands, filling the space around his fleet like a swarm of angry insects. Point defense activate, he shouted. The Vexari ships began firing. Lasers and plasma bolts filled the space around Earth, destroying missile after missile. But for every one they killed, 10 more took its place. The humans had emptied their arsenals. Every nuclear weapon, every conventional warhead, every rocket they had ever built. They had launched everything at the Vexari fleet in one desperate salvo. It was the last throw of the dice, the final act of a species that refused to go quietly. Most of the missiles were destroyed, most but not all. Torex watched in horror as warheads began impacting his ships. Nuclear explosions blossomed in space, silent and terrible. Ships died. More ships died. Cruisers, destroyers, frigates, all consumed by fire. When it was over, the Vexari fleet had been reduced to 89 vessels. 89 ships, from an original force of 200. And the humans were still not done. High Admiral, more contacts, ships emerging from behind their moon again. Torex spun to face his tactical officer, his clawed hands gripping the armrest of his command chair. How many? The officer's voice trembled. 622, High Admiral. That is impossible. We destroyed their fleet. These are different ships, High Admiral. Different designs. Some of them are civilian vessels that have been armed. Others appear to be newly constructed. They must have been building them even while we were fighting. 600 ships. 600 primitive, crude, ugly ships manned by a species that refused to die. A species that had converted cargo haulers and passenger liners into weapons of war. A species that had worked through the night, every night, building their fleet from nothing. They came screaming out of the darkness, weapons blazing. The second defense of Earth lasted 12 hours. It was the bloodiest battle in Vexari history. Human ships died by the dozen, but they kept coming. They rammed. They exploded. They crashed into Vexari vessels and detonated their reactors. They fought with a fury that defied all reason. When it finally ended, only 34 Vexari ships remained. 34 ships out of 200. High Admiral Torex was among the survivors. His flagship had taken severe damage. Half his crew was dead. The Eternal Dominion was barely holding together, its engines sputtering, its weapons offline. But they had won again. The human fleet was gone again. This time, however, there would be no third attack. This time, Torex did not wait to see what new surprises the humans had prepared. All ships, he commanded. Full retreat. Return to Vexari space immediately. His officers stared at him in shock. High Admiral, one of them dared to say, we have not completed the conquest. Earth still stands. Earth can burn in its own time, Torex snarled. We have lost 166 ships to a species we were told could not threaten us. We will return to the Empire, rebuild our forces, and come back with a fleet so large that even these insane humans cannot stop us. The The surviving Vexari ships turned and fled. They activated their space-bending engines and disappeared into the void, leaving behind a debris field that would orbit Earth for centuries. Behind them, Earth remained, wounded but alive, defiant as always. Admiral Chen watched the enemy fleet retreat and allowed herself one moment of relief. They had survived. Against all odds, against all reason, they had survived. Then she turned to her staff. How long until they come back? Her intelligence officer consulted his data. Based on the distance to Vexari space and their fleet construction capacity, 18 months minimum, more likely 2 to 3 years. Chen nodded slowly. 2 years, maybe 3. Then we have work to do, she said. I want every shipyard operating at maximum capacity. I want every mine producing at double output. I want every scientist working on new weapons, new defenses, new technologies. When they come back, I want them to find a fleet so large it blocks out the sun. Her officers nodded and began issuing orders. The humans had won their first victory, but they knew, all of them, that the war was just beginning. The Vexari Empire learned of the disaster 3 months later. When High Admiral Torex delivered his report to the Imperial Council, there was silence in the Great Chamber for a long time. The counselors sat in their elevated seats, their scaled faces unreadable, their ancient eyes fixed on the admiral who stood before them. You lost 166 ships, the Emperor finally said, his voice echoing through the chamber, to a species that has barely achieved interstellar travel. Yes, Divine Majesty. You lost 166 ships, and the enemy still stands. Yes, Divine Majesty. The Emperor leaned forward on his throne. He was ancient, his scales dulled with age, but his eyes were still sharp. He had ruled the empire for 300 years. He had never heard of such a failure. Explain to me how this happened. Torex tried. He told them about the hidden fleet, constructed in secret beneath the moon's surface, the desperate bravery of the human pilots, their willingness to sacrifice themselves without hesitation, the nuclear salvo that had caught his fleet off guard, the second fleet that emerged from nowhere, crewed by civilians who had turned themselves into soldiers overnight. He told them about the suicidal tactics, the ramming attacks, the ships that exploded rather than surrender, the absolute commitment to victory or death, the refusal to accept the inevitable. When he finished, the council murmured among themselves. These humans sound dangerous, one of them said. They are primitive, another countered. We simply underestimated them. Send a larger fleet and they will fall. How much larger? How many ships must we sacrifice to this stubborn species? The council fell silent again. 500 ships, Torex said quietly. At minimum, with ground forces prepared for a lengthy occupation, and even then I am not certain of victory. 500 ships, the Emperor's voice was sharp, for a single primitive world. For a world that will not surrender, Divine Majesty. For a species that will fight with their bare hands if all their weapons are gone. For an enemy that would rather die than submit. The Emperor considered this. He had ruled for 3 centuries. He had seen empires rise and fall. He knew the danger of an enemy who had nothing to lose. Then we will send 1,000 ships, he said finally. We will assemble the largest fleet in imperial history. We will crush these humans so completely that not even their memory will survive. The council voiced their approval. And far away in the Sol system, the humans were building. They built ships in orbital shipyards and underground factories. They built weapons in laboratories on every continent. They built defenses around every planet, every moon, every asteroid they could reach. Admiral Chen drove them relentlessly. She slept 4 hours a night, spending the rest of her time reviewing production reports, meeting with scientists, planning strategies. She knew what was coming. She knew the Vexari would return with overwhelming force. But she also knew something the Vexari did not. She knew that humans were at their most dangerous when they were backed into a corner. History had proven it again and again. The siege of Stalingrad, the Battle of Britain, the Alamo. When humans faced extinction, they found reserves of strength they never knew they had. 18 months passed. The Vexari Armada assembled. 1,000 warships, the largest fleet the Empire had ever deployed. They carried ground armies, siege weapons, planet-cracking missiles. They carried enough firepower to destroy Earth 100 times over. They came for humanity. And they found something they did not expect. The Sol system had been transformed. Where once there had been scattered colonies and a handful of defense platforms, now there was a fortress. Every approach was covered by weapons batteries. Every asteroid had been turned into a weapons platform. The human fleet alone numbered 900 ships, and they had built a network of space stations and orbital fortresses to support them. The humans had not just rebuilt. They had prepared for war on a scale the Vexari had never imagined. High Admiral Torex, commanding the invasion fleet from his new flagship, stared at the tactical display and felt that familiar doubt return. "They built all of this," he said slowly, "in 18 months. His tactical officer nodded. "They appear to have converted their entire industrial capacity to military production, High Admiral. Every factory, every shipyard, every resource extraction facility. Their entire species." "Yes, High Admiral, every nation on their planet working together. They have suspended all non-essential activities. Their entire civilization is focused on one goal, stopping us." Torex shook his head slowly. The Vexari Empire had 900 worlds. They had spent 50 years building this fleet. The humans had one system and 18 months, and they had nearly matched it. "What kind of species was this?" "We proceed as planned," Torex said, but his voice lacked conviction. "All ships, battle formation, prepare to engage." The Third Battle of Sol, as the humans would later call it, lasted 3 days. It was the largest space battle in known history. Over 1,900 warships clashed in a titanic struggle that stretched from the orbit of Mars to the edge of the asteroid belt. The Vexari had superior technology. The humans had superior numbers, intimate knowledge of their home system, and that same terrible ferocity that had shocked the Empire before. When it was over, the Vexari fleet had been reduced to fragments. Only 200 ships escaped the Sol system. High Admiral Torex was not among them. His flagship had been rammed by 3 human destroyers in a coordinated suicide attack. He died without ever understanding how his conquest had gone so wrong. The humans lost 400 ships. They mourned their dead, honored their heroes, and began building again. The war had entered a new phase. The survivors of the Vexari invasion fleet brought word of the disaster home. The Empire, for the first time in its 12,000-year history, knew the taste of defeat. Some in the council urged caution. Perhaps, they said, it was better to leave the humans alone. Let them have their little system. The galaxy was large enough for both species. Others demanded revenge. The honor of the Empire could not accept such a humiliation. They must return with an even larger fleet, even more powerful weapons. They must crush the humans completely. The Emperor listened to both sides. Then he made his decision. "We will build a fleet of 5,000 ships," he declared. "It will take 10 years. When it is ready, we will erase the Sol system from existence. Every planet, every moon, every asteroid. Nothing will remain." The council approved the plan. Construction began across the Empire's 900 worlds. But the humans were not idle. In the years that followed the Third Battle of Sol, humanity underwent a transformation. They had been pushed to the brink of extinction. They had survived. And now they had a choice: hide in their system and wait for the Vexari to return, or take the fight to the enemy. They chose to fight. Using captured Vexari technology, human scientists worked frantically to unlock the secrets of faster-than-light travel. It took them 2 years to crack the code. 6 months after that, the first human FTL ship made its maiden voyage. Admiral Chen, now commanding the United Earth Fleet, stood on the bridge of humanity's first interstellar warship and watched the stars blur as they jumped to hyperspace. "Set course for the nearest Vexari colony," she ordered. The war came to the Empire. The first Vexari colony to fall was Kethris Prime, a mining world on the outer edge of Imperial space. The human fleet appeared without warning, destroyed the small garrison, and began evacuating the planet's resources. The Empire responded by dispatching a defense fleet. It arrived to find the humans already gone, along with 3 orbital refineries and millions of tons of processed metals. It was a pattern that would repeat itself across the Empire. The humans struck fast, took what they needed, and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. They were not trying to conquer. They were not trying to occupy. They were building. In the Sol system, the resources stolen from the Empire fed a military-industrial machine that never stopped growing. Shipyards produced warships at an impossible rate. Factories churned out weapons, ammunition, supplies. The human fleet doubled in size, then doubled again. And still, the humans were not satisfied. They began recruiting. Among the 900 worlds of the Empire, there were species that had been conquered, enslaved, broken to the imperial will. But the fire of resistance had not died in all of them. Deep in their hearts, the Velori still remembered freedom. The Krix still dreamed of revenge. The Manthari still prayed for deliverance. Human agents made contact with rebel groups across the Empire. They offered weapons, training, support. They offered something even more valuable, hope. They showed that the Empire could be beaten. They showed that resistance was not futile. The Velori uprising began in the 5th year of the war. The Krix rebellion followed 6 months later. Then the Manthari, the Saureks, the Drellin. One by one, the conquered species of the Empire rose against their masters. The Vexari found themselves fighting on a dozen fronts. Their grand fleet of 5,000 ships, still under construction, was delayed again and again as resources were diverted to suppress rebellions. In the Imperial Council, voices of desperation joined voices of anger. "We must negotiate," some said. "We must find a way to end this war before it destroys us." "Never," others shouted. "We are the Vexari Empire. We do not negotiate with lesser species." The Emperor listened, as he always did. And then, for the first time in his long reign, he made a decision born of fear. "Send an envoy to the humans," he said. "Offer them peace. Offer them whatever they want as long as they stop this war." The envoy was dispatched. He traveled to the Sol system under a flag of truce, carrying the Emperor's offer of peace. Admiral Chen received him in her office on Luna Base. She was older now, gray turned to white, but her eyes still burned with the same fire that had startled High Admiral Torex so many years before. "The Emperor offers you peace," the envoy said. "He will recognize human sovereignty over the Sol system. He will withdraw all Imperial forces from your borders. He will even pay reparations for the colonies we destroyed. All he asks is that you end your attacks on Imperial worlds and stop supporting the rebel movements." Chen listened in silence. When the envoy finished, she took a long moment before responding. "Do you know how many humans died in your first attack?" she asked. The envoy shifted uncomfortably. "I do not have the exact figures." 11,342,681. Chen's voice was flat. "That is how many of my people died before we could even begin to fight back. Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, the Belt. 11 million people with names and families and dreams." She stood and walked to the window. Outside, ships moved in careful patterns, an endless ballet of human industry. We remember every single one of them, she said. We will always remember, and we will never forgive. She turned back to the envoy. Go back to your emperor. Tell him that his offer is rejected. Tell him that humanity will never stop fighting until the Vexari Empire no longer exists. Tell him that every colony he has, every world he rules will fall. And tell him that when his empire is dust and ashes, we will still be here, building, growing, remembering. The envoy returned to Vexari Prime with humanity's answer. The war continued. The final phase of the war began in the 10th year. The Vexari Grand Fleet was at last complete, 4,800 ships, the largest armada ever assembled in galactic history. It was fewer than the promised 5,000, but the Emperor could wait no longer. The rebellions were spreading. The economy was collapsing. The Empire was dying. The fleet set out for the Sol system, carrying the last hope of the Vexari Empire. They never reached their destination. The human fleet met them in the Kethris Nebula, 1,000 light-years from Sol. It was not the 900 ships that had defended Earth years before. It was not even twice that number. The human fleet numbered 6,000 warships. 6,000 ships, built in 10 years by a species that had barely achieved interstellar travel when the war began. 6,000 ships crewed by millions of humans who had grown up knowing nothing but war, who had trained for nothing but this moment. And they were not alone. Behind the human lines came the ships of the rebellion, Velori cruisers with their distinctive red hulls, Krix destroyers bristling with weapons, Manthari carriers launching swarms of fighter craft, Sarex frigates and Drellin battleships, the conquered peoples of the Empire, armed with human weapons and burning with ancient hatred. The combined fleet numbered over 8,000 warships, against 4,800 Vexari vessels. The Battle of Kethris Nebula lasted 6 hours. It was the largest naval engagement in recorded history. Thousands of ships clashed in the swirling gases of the nebula, their weapons lighting up the darkness like distant stars. When it was over, the Vexari Grand Fleet had ceased to exist. With their last great military force destroyed, the Empire crumbled. World after world fell to the combined forces of humans and rebels. The Vexari retreated, then retreated again, then had nowhere left to retreat to. In the 12th year of the war, human ships entered orbit above Vexari Prime. Admiral Chen was no longer alive to see it. She had died 3 years earlier, peacefully in her sleep, her life's work complete. But her spirit lived on in every human who had fought and died for this moment. The new commander of the human fleet was Admiral James Chen, Sarah's grandson. He carried his grandmother's last message in his pocket, a simple note that read, "Finish it." He looked down at the capital world of the Empire, at the great cities and ancient palaces of a civilization that had ruled for 12,000 years. Then he gave his orders. All ships hold fire, do not attack civilian targets. His officers looked at him in surprise. "Sir." "The war is over," Chen said. "The Empire is defeated. We did not fight for 12 years just to become the monsters we were fighting against." He opened a channel to the planet below. "People of Vexari Prime, this is Admiral James Chen of the United Earth Fleet. Your military forces have been destroyed. Your emperor has fled. Your government has collapsed. The war is over." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We could destroy your world," he continued. "We have the power. Some would say we have the right after everything your empire did to us, but we choose not to. Humanity did not fight this war for revenge. We fought for survival. We fought for freedom. And we fought so that no one else would ever suffer what we suffered. Today, the Vexari Empire ends, but the Vexari people will continue. You will rebuild under your own rule as free beings. This is the gift we offer you, the chance to start again, to become something better than what you were." He straightened in his chair. "Remember this day. Remember that you were shown mercy when you showed none. Remember that humanity had every reason to hate you and chose not to. And if you ever think about building another empire, about conquering other species, about ruling by fear and force, remember what happened to the last empire that tried. The transmission ended. Below, on the ancient world of the Vexari, the people emerged from their shelters and looked up at the sky full of human ships. Some wept with relief. Some wept with shame. Some simply stood in silence, trying to understand how everything they had known had come to an end. The war was over. Humanity had won. In the years that followed, the galaxy underwent a transformation. The old empire was gone, its colonies now independent worlds, its subject species now free peoples. A new order emerged, built not on conquest and domination, but on cooperation and mutual respect. At the center of this new order was humanity. The species that had been marked for extinction had become the leaders of a galactic community, not through force, but through example. They had shown that a people could face the worst the universe had to offer and not only survive, but become stronger. On Earth, memorials were built to the 11 million who had died in the first attack. Every year, on the anniversary of the destruction of Mars, humanity paused to remember. They remembered the names, the faces, the lives cut short. They remembered the fear and the anger and the grief. And they remembered what they had done with that pain. They had not let it destroy them. They had not let it make them into monsters. They had taken it and transformed it into something else: determination, courage, hope. In the great assembly hall of the Galactic Council, a plaque was mounted above the main entrance. It bore the words of Admiral Sarah Chen, spoken in the darkest hours of humanity's greatest trial. We endure, we adapt, we overcome, and we never ever give up. The Vexari had seen humans as primitive, as weak, as easy prey. They had underestimated human resilience, and they had paid for that mistake with every colony they had. But more than that, they had learned the truth about humanity. Not that humans were the strongest species in the galaxy. Not that they had the most advanced technology or the greatest military might. What made humans dangerous, what made them survivors, what made them winners, was something far simpler and far more powerful. They simply refused to quit. No matter how bad things got, no matter how hopeless the situation seemed, no matter how many times they were knocked down, humans got back up. They fought, they built, they learned, they grew. And in the end, that was enough. That was more than enough. The galaxy had learned to respect humanity. Some had learned to fear them, but all had learned the lesson that the Vexari had paid so dearly to teach. Never, ever underestimate a human's will to survive. Because when you back a human into a corner, when you take everything they have, when you push them to the very edge of extinction, something remarkable happens. They don't break. They become unbreakable. And then they come for you. The stars themselves bear witness to this truth. Where once the Vexari Empire stretched across 900 worlds, now free peoples chart their own destinies. Where once humans were dismissed as primitives, now they stand as equals among the great species of the cosmos. This is the legacy of the war. This is the price the Empire paid for its arrogance. And this is the story that will be told across all the worlds of the galaxy, for as long as the stars continue to burn. The story of how humanity refused to die.